Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Let's turn now, having discussed to some extent the problems of Wall Street. Maybe just a couple of more notes about this. Mother Jones has an interesting article this week talking about how the stifling, strangling method of this idiotic anarchist General Assembly, minority rule as it's known, or the Procrustean bed, how this came to Wall Street. Well, we have to thank two Spanish agents, Begonia and Luis, two, I don't know what, apostles of somebody's intelligence agency, who decided to introduce this strange, alien, foreign, and inherently unworkable idea into the Wall Street, the steering committee in 16 Beaver Street during the summer. Take a look at that. Confirm some of the things we've heard before, that it was so-called Spanish and Greek students who did this. Not a good idea. And we've also got the question of the Situationist International lurking in the background. The two Naomis were there this week trying to cash in, right? Michael Moore cashes in, promotes himself as the group becomes more demoralized because of misleadership. He gets more traction. Naomi Klein had been there before. Now Naomi Wolf gets arrested, so you get the idea. Anyway, we've got to change gears, turn away from this stuff, and look at the tragedy of Libya, the reports of the death of Gaddafi. This is, of course, a monstrous and horrifying spectacle. We're horrified and shamed by the gloating of the ghouls. We're mortified that these things are done in the name of the United States and the other NATO states, and this is a Nuremberg crime that must be condemned. And, of course, when you sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind. And the whirlwind is now that the Vandals are in full control of Libya. Ironic parallel between the decline of the Roman Empire and the decline of the Anglo-American Empire today. Back in the time of about 400 A.D., the time right before St. Augustine, we had the Vandals taking over North Africa and extending their reach into Sicily, Sardinia, and finally sacking Rome in 476 A.D. This is a tragic parallel because today it's going to be Al-Qaeda piracy in the Mediterranean. The warlord of North Africa is now Belhaj Hassadi, the butcher, the Al-Qaeda killer, fanatic, terrorist, mercenary, who had been brought in back from Pakistan and Afghanistan to do the crimes that we're now seeing. The estimate is now that the U.S. has spent between $1 and $2 billion. I think that's probably low. The total NATO bill is not known. We're told that so far NATO has organized 26,000 sorties, of which 9618 were strike sorties, and the U.S. 7,725 sorties by aircraft, with a large number of these being bombing runs. Well, compared to the Gulf War of 20 years ago, it simply shows the growing logistic weakness of NATO. In the Gulf War, it was 120,000 sorties over a period of 5 weeks. Now it's 7 months and a total of 26,000 sorties. Question is Gaddafi actually dead? And I say at this point, this is a question mark. This is an open question. Gaddafi, I think, was likely to have had some doubles. These undoubtedly were deployed, and the question is now, the NATO forces, did they get a double or did they get Gaddafi? It's also clear that he was leaving Sirte in a convoy, was bombed by NATO. They now claim a U.S. Predator and a French jet shared the responsibility for this. Who knows? These are just stories told by NATO intelligence. And then he fell into the hands of the rats, the vermin, and was then assassinated, executed, murdered on the scene. This is something of an embarrassment to the imperialists, but that won't last long. Other people we need to worry about. Saif Gaddafi. There are conflicting reports. Some reports say Saif Gaddafi was captured. Reuters today says Saif Gaddafi is fleeing towards Niger. He's fleeing into the south of Libya. General Khamis Gaddafi, reported dead before. Persistent reports, no, not dead. I would say at this point, not dead. Motassim Gaddafi, reported killed together with his father. Aisha Gaddafi, prominent daughter, alive in Algeria and broadcasting defiance. Musa Ibrahim, the very courageous spokesman of the Libyan government, also, I believe, free and still contributing to the resistance. Sanusi, the security chief, also not captured, not dead, and probably still operating. So this continues. A guerrilla war undoubtedly continues, if only because of the splits inside the terrorist coalition. It's important to point out one of the reasons Gaddafi had to die was the fear in NATO ruling circles of a trial. A trial for Gaddafi would have ruined Tony Blair. That would have been the end of the game for Tony Blair, currently the envoy of the quartet into the Middle East. It would have been very bad for Bush the Younger. It would have been bad for Obama. It would have been bad for a whole bunch of European politicians, Berlusconi, Sarkozy. So a consensus that he had to die, if this is in fact the case, that anybody looking like Gaddafi captured would be murdered. The NTC, the terrorists, the National Transitional Council, had promised that they wouldn't kill him, that they would put him on trial. Well, we see. You can see what an armed mob looks like. You can see that bunch of vermin who killed Gaddafi, what those assurances are worth. Now, the obvious split in the National Transitional Council, the Benghazi rebels, the NATO puppets, the split is between the Gaddafi renegades and Gaddafi retreads on the one side. That would be Jalil, the head of state, and Jibril, the head of government, on the other side, and the Al-Qaeda, hardcore Al-Qaeda killers, people like Belhaj. The difference is, were you a minister in Gaddafi's government, or were you an international celebrity, or were you an Al-Qaeda killer on the ground in Afghanistan and in Pakistan? And these cultural differences will now play a big role, along with tribal, regional, and other kinds of differences. Jibril had already said that he would quit his job as prime minister when the liberation had been completed. Well, don't hold your breath on that. But Belhaj is more and more rambunctious as the warlord of Tripoli, busting into meetings, demanding veto power over all decisions, and so forth. So I think you're headed towards a night of the long knives, a night of the long knives where it's very likely that the Al-Qaeda characters will liquidate large numbers of the Gaddafi retreads and, above all, the international human rights types, the sort of Jibril people. So for a lot of these people now guilty of the murder of Gaddafi, if that is the case, vengeance is coming on rapid wings. The imperialist jackals are already gathering. We can see what they're interested in. Privatization. The free market, of course. And I wonder how anybody can say free market privatization in the United States with a straight face when you see that this is exactly what the IMF, NATO, and imperialism want to bring to Libya. Today, this morning, Jim Cramer on CNBC says Libya is the next big thing. In other words, the next carcass that can be looted and stripped and assets stripped by these international vultures coming in. So shame on the NATO political leaders. The Nuremberg precedents are there, they apply, and maybe some of us will live to see the day that they're actually called to account. We'll be back in just a minute on World Crisis Radio.